Well, a very good morning to all of you, and I hope you are doing well. God has something special for you today. This is your host, Pastor Bill Brendel, bringing you another edition of the Holy Spirit Unveiled podcast. And as you listen, I believe something good is going to happen to you today. Now, I hope you've ordered my new book, The Holy Spirit Baptism Unveiled. So many have told me once they started reading it, they could not put it down. So, get your copy today on Amazon. Now, today, I would like to begin sharing some of the many great benefits of having the baptism in the Holy Spirit. First of all, I want to assure you that the baptism in the Holy Spirit is far, far more than just articulating sounds and syllables that we don't understand. If that is what you think the essence of the Holy Spirit baptism is, you have completely missed its meaning, its purpose, and its benefit. Now, I know some people only get focused on emotionalism, and they think that the Holy Spirit baptism is all about emotionalism, and I assure you that's not it at all. While praying in tongues is clearly necessary to the Holy Spirit baptism, it is not the why of the entire experience. The why of the entire experience is first and foremost power. In Acts chapter 1, verse 8, Jesus promised that every born-again believer would receive power as a result of the Holy Spirit baptism. This power is not just to share the gospel in the language of our understanding. It is power from within the indwelling Holy Spirit to perform miracles. Now, in Mark chapter 16, verse 17, Jesus said, "Along with speaking in tongues, these signs shall follow them that believe. They shall cast out devils. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover." Boy, that sounds like power. So the baptism in the Holy Spirit enables us to release more power than just sharing the gospel with our native language. Now, of course, we have to share the gospel in our native language, of course, for people to understand. But there has to be more to it than that. The baptism in the Holy Spirit enables us to release miracle-working power. The baptism in the Holy Spirit gives us the ability to be used in the power of the 9 gifts of the Spirit that are listed in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 to 11. Now, here's a list of those 9 gifts of the Spirit. The gift of the word of wisdom, the gift of the word of knowledge, the gift of faith, the gifts of healing, the gift of the working of miracles, the gift of prophecy, the gift of discerning of spirits, the gift of diverse kinds of tongues, and the gift of the interpretation of tongues. Wow. Now that's quite a list. Tremendous, miraculous power can be manifested in all of those gifts. And today I will not go into each of those 9 gifts, but in weeks to come we will eventually cover each one of them. But for today, my point is this. The Holy Spirit baptism and the gifts of the Spirit go hand in hand in the manifestation of power. That is the power Jesus said we would receive with the Holy Spirit baptism. And if you read the context, Jesus was clearly associating power with the Holy Spirit baptism with tongues. Now in Acts chapter 1, verse 4, it says Jesus commanded them that they should not depart from Jerusalem, but wait for the promise of the Father, which you have heard of me. The promise of the Father. The promise of the Father was first prophesied by Joel in the Old Testament, in Joel chapter 2, verse 28. I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. So that was the promise of the Father. Now, What was the promise of the Father? It was the outpouring of the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost, according to the prophet Joel. Peter mentions it in his sermon that day. And also in Acts chapter 2, verse 39, he says, for the promise that Joel spoke of, the promise of the Father that Joel spoke of, for the promise is unto you and to your children and to all that are far off, even as many as the Lord our God shall call. Now, yes, he said we would certainly be empowered to spread the gospel as a result of that Holy Spirit baptism. Oh, yes. But the deeper implications of spreading the gospel are to be understood in the context of the demonstration of that power, not just the preaching about that power. Mark chapter 16, verse 20 says, and they went forth and preached everywhere. Now listen to the next part. The Lord was working with them and confirming the word with signs following. They were supernatural signs. What were these signs? They were demonstrations of the power of God to heal the sick and to cast out devils. In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, the Apostle Paul said, my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but I came with a display of the power so outstanding that it really showed off the power of God. Now, the baptism in the Holy Spirit will empower us to demonstrate the power of God to the lost. The lost are waiting to see the power of God. They don't just want to hear about it. They want a demonstration of it. The baptism in the Holy Spirit is the gateway to the supernatural manifestation of the power of God. Now, I know, unfortunately, there has been and always will be excess and abuse of the power of the things of the Spirit. It occurred in the Corinthian church, and it still occurs today. But we must bring balanced teaching to such issues rather than throwing out the baby with the bathwater and just kind of discrediting the baptism of the Holy Spirit altogether. Because no matter how saved or filled with the Spirit we are, God's people are still imperfect. And therefore, the way they use or misuse the power of God is imperfect. Yes, the Holy Spirit is perfect, but the vessels he uses are very imperfect. So the baptism in the Holy Spirit doesn't make any of us perfect. It only makes us available to the Holy Spirit's power. Unfortunately, those who are critical of the human flaws of the Holy Spirit baptized believer, they do so because they are focused on the person being used instead of the Holy Spirit who is using them. Let me encourage you. Although you may have many imperfections as any other born-again believer, you can still be baptized in the Holy Spirit and you can be used of God. Many of the greats in the Bible had many imperfections, but God still used them mightily. So if you desire to have the baptism in the Holy Spirit, it is because the Holy Spirit himself is trying to give you the utterance. That's right, the utterance of speaking in tongues. All you have to do is yield your tongue to him by faith and speak. The Holy Spirit will do the rest. You will hear your voice. God will hear his voice. Now, next week, I'll continue to share some of the tremendous benefits and blessings that there are in having the baptism in the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in other tongues. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Let me remind you to get a copy of my book, The Holy Spirit Baptism Unveiled. It's on Amazon right now. So until next week, be filled with the Spirit until you overflow onto others. God bless you.